Okay. Dr. Tom Rush, welcome to the show, brother. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing great, Richard. Thanks for having me. Glad to be with you again.
Yeah, no, thanks for coming again. Lots to talk about. There's always lots to talk about. And
Yes, sir.
I've already had a little conversations, at least on this channel, with talking about the SBC, the law amendment, the pros and the cons, the wins and losses. But I want to get your take. You've gone to the convention meeting for years and years. You're a pastor, you're an evangelist, you're down in Georgia, and you know the convention probably better than, well, a lot of guys, especially guys, in their 30s, 40s, and 50s. And what was your kind of overall take on the meeting? And I want to kind of get into the law amendment a little bit
Sure.
and a few other things. What was your overall take on the meeting?
Well, it was disappointing overall. I went with the hope that we could elect a conservative president. We didn't do that. I went with a very strong hope that we would pass the law amendment again, which, as you well know, we did not. So it was very disappointing from that perspective. We had the opportunity at the convention to do a lot of really good things.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I think is confusing to people is you've got uh, the platform, the folks that are in control are saying, Southern Baptists are conservative. And there's been no change in that. In fact, we're more conservative now than we've ever been. But the facts just don't bear that out.
Mm.
I had a kind of a social media disagreement with Sam Rayner, Tom Rayner's son. I've known Sam for several years. In fact, I went through interim pastor training. I did the Church Answers Interim Pastor University. I felt like it'd be a good credential, and quite honestly, learned an awful lot from it. It was a good program, and Sam worked with me on that. I turned in all the papers I had to write, and everything. Sam went over those, so we had some conversations, and he had some data that he claimed uh, essentially proved that the Southern Baptist Convention was more conservative now than it was 40 years ago. And it was
Mm.
on the basis of the number of Southern Baptists. And I didn't check the research. I don't necessarily doubt it, but the data said that the Southern Baptist Convention has more Republicans today than it did 40 years ago. And that may
Mm-hmm.
very well be true. 40 years ago, we still had a lot of yellow dog Democrats, if you understand that term. I mean, people that have been Democrats all their life and they weren't going to change for anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's gone. So uh, I suppose you could argue that we might be more politically conservative than we were 40 years ago. But theologically, that is definitely not the case.
Mm-hmm.
I would simply argue, I've been going to the convention for over 40 years now. And, I haven't been to every single convention. I spent some time in the military. I was deployed, couldn't get there, those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been to an awful lot of conventions over my 40 plus years as a Southern Baptist pastor. I've been a Southern Baptist all my life. And, when the conservative resurgence took over and Adrian Rogers was elected in 79, now through the 80s and 90s, when you would go to the Southern Baptist Convention, you would hear conservative uh, Bible preaching in the pastors' conference and at the convention. You'd hear great gospel music. I mean, there were times, I look forward to going to the pastors' conference. It was a time to go and be encouraged. I mean, the guys would get up there and just preach the stars down.
Mm.
Pastors would be flocking to the front in an invitation time, recommitting themselves to faithfully serve the Lord. And it was just so much encouragement. For example, I remember Jerry Vine's sermon in 1986, "A Baptist and His Bible." That's just one of those classic sermons that was preached at the convention. It was those kind of things. Now, I mean, I don't even go to the pastors' conference anymore, but the pastors' conference and the convention, you get TED talks and lectures on how to be more liberal. And I don't see how
Mm-hmm.
in the world that can make us more conservative. We've had the opportunity for, I guess, at least 7 years now to elect conservative presidents and have not done so. Then there's the fact that we have passed some resolutions that certainly could not be considered conservative,
Mm-hmm.
like Resolution 9 in Birmingham back in 2019. So,
Right.
I was hopeful. I go every year hopeful, and go every year praying that we're going to get it together. The Conservative Baptist Network has worked hard. Founders Ministry has worked hard to try to build a coalition and to encourage people to go. I've been encouraging people to go to the convention. I sometimes get a little frustrated with pastors who complain about the direction of the convention, and I'll say, "Well, did you go?" And the
Hmm.
answer is no. And a lot of times, Richard, it has to do with finances. They'll say, "Well, I can't afford to go." And my response to that has been, "Well, stop giving your money to the cooperative program and take that money and use it to go to the convention."
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can, you don't have to
100%.
give very much to get at least two messengers from your church. You and your wife go and take the money you were given to
Hmm.
the cooperative program and use that to pay for your way to the convention. And
Yeah.
so, Southern Baptists have got to pay attention to what's going on. Now, there's a lot more that I could say about it, but overall, Indianapolis was a great disappointment to me
Mhm.
for several reasons. The failure of the law amendment was one, and there's much more we can say about that. The failure to get financial transparency. There were several motions made to bring about financial transparency of our entities, and even I was a trustee. I just finished up 10 years at Southern Seminary as a trustee. I couldn't tell you really anything about the finances of Southern Seminary. I mean, I know a little bit, but
Really?
don't know anything
Wow.
about salaries. Don't know anything about where some of the money is coming from and where it's going. And
Mm.
they're very, very tight about that. And the other trustees don't seem to care. And then, of
Wow.
course, we had the opportunity again in Indianapolis, as we've had for the last several conventions, to elect a conservative president. We did not. We lost that. The
Mm.
North American Mission Board is absolutely, totally out of control. And as I said, I feel like that the trustee system is just completely broken. So from that perspective, it was disappointing. It was
Yeah.
encouraging to see that there were a lot of good, solid, Bible believing Baptist people there. There were quite a number of meetings in association with the convention that were mostly sponsored by the Conservative Baptist Network that drew over 1,000 people, and good information was given out there. And the Founders Ministry brought a great contingent of people. There were good folks there,
Hmm.
but then when the votes came, we just didn't have the numbers on the convention floor to get the things done that, at least from my perspective, I feel like that we would need to do.
Yeah. Um, so you said we haven't elected, and we still didn't just last month, a conservative president. What do you mean by that? Because you talk to anybody and everybody, they'll say well, I'm a conservative. Of course, I'm a conservative. We're all conservatives. We're all, it's what are you talking about, Tom? What do you define as conservative? In as a What would you want to see? I guess is maybe
Well,
the best way.
the downhill run. I mean, we have been electing more or less conservative, solid conservative guys as president. And if you remember back in 2016, Steve Gaines from Bellevue ran against J.D. Greer. It ended up
Yes.
in a very, very tight race. And there was an agreement between Gaines and Greer that Greer would withdraw uh, based on Gaines supporting him to be elected in 2 years. So
Yeah.
we ended up with J.D. Greer because of Steve Gaines. And I'm sorry,
Hmm.
that just that was because Greer is not a conservative. He's soft on the LGBTQ agenda. He's social justice on steroids. I just, he's not the kind of man that we needed leading us. And then with the COVID thing, he ended up being the SBC president for 3 years and
Yes.
led us
Yeah.
into all this horrible stuff that we've gotten into with the sex abuse task force and the abuse reform committee now, whatever it's called. I can't remember the
There's
exact
several.
yeah, exact acronym that they're using now. Well, that just has been such a mess, and many of us have tried to bring some sanity to that, It's just really, really sad. So that kind of started the downhill run. And then, of course, it was Ed Litton and Mike Stone in Nashville in 21. We had the opportunity to elect Mike. Mike actually won the first vote, but then lost in the runoff. And then, of course, there was the plagiarism deal with Litton. And so then, we go out to Anaheim, and Tom Askell is running against Bart Barber. And we lose again. And both of those votes with Mike Stone and Tom Askell, we lost by a little bit less than 1,000 votes, or a little more than 1,000, right around 1,000 votes both times. Mike and Tom were committed to turning the SBC around, committed to doing the right things. Clearly, strong Bible believing pastors, great preachers, both of them. And so we've had the opportunity to elect some good men. And of course, in New Orleans in 23, Barber was reelected, which just only made sense. And of course, this year we ended up with 6 candidates, 2 of whom I considered very conservative. I voted the first time around for Jared Moore, and the reason I did is that Jared laid out exactly what he was going to do. I'm not going. He said, I'm not going to, as president, I'm not going to appoint anybody that doesn't affirm the Baptist faith and message and practice that in their church. I'm not going to appoint anybody that is soft on the LGBTQ agenda. I'm not going to appoint anybody that is soft on the social justice stuff, that's woke in any way whatsoever. And so, Jared just laid it out there what he was going to do. And I also felt like that David Allen was a very capable candidate. And and we end up with Clint Presley. Now, Clint, of course, he's a good guy. I've known Clint for years. We served on the board together at Southern. He's going to tell you that he's a conservative, but he's what Richard, I would call a company man. He's going to do what the powers that be tell him to do, and that would be the entity presidents basically, and the platform personnel. And so we're not going to see the kind of people appointed to the committees, the resolutions committee, the committee on order of business, and of course the committee on committees. These are significant committees that have a tremendous amount of power, and all of those are appointed by the president.
Right. Yeah. Wow. So I guess why, and it's always the big question, why then, if you said there's a lot of Bible believing Baptists, lots of great people at the meeting, although, what was it, 10,000, 10,500, something like that, which is a drop in the bucket to the whatever 13, 14 million supposed members. Although I love the phrase, the SBC has 14 million and the FBI can't find half of them, or whatever the joke is. I'm sure
that's a bit of a misnomer, because that half of them we don't know where they are.
Right.
And half of the ones that we do know where they are, half of them don't show up to church on Sunday.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So it's much smaller number.
Right.
But as Baptists, we love numbers. We love numbers. As much as we love food, we love numbers. But I can say that because, but why do the people trust the platform? I mean, I know there was some manipulating, it seemed like, in 23 at New Orleans. The mics went out early on Tuesday, and a few things, and it was a better meeting than Anaheim was the year before, for sure.
I agree.
As far as interrupting and this, and giving Rick Warren multiple minutes, and grandstanding and all that. But why do people? I mean, like you said, off air, even as a trustee, deep respect for Al Mohler. You have it too, you said. But it's kind of like the trustees are just, okay, whatever you say, Prez, we got you. And it's like the whole point of the trustee, and correct me if I'm wrong, is to keep the institution in trust from the president, to make sure. This is why we have a separation of powers, the 3 branches of government.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. That's kind of the same thing, to make sure the president just doesn't run off and do tyrannical type stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So why do people, oh yeah, I'm conservative, I'll vote, absolutely, and then they turn around and they vote with the herd? What do you
that's a great question, and all I can do is conjecture and opinion here. Um,
That's
it's
good.
like
I
we
like that.
check our brains at the door when we get to the convention.
Mm,
Um, I think people come unprepared. They haven't studied the issues before they get there. It's kind of like the way people vote. You know, they go into the voting booth. They haven't looked at the
yeah.
candidates. They don't know what the candidates believe in. And when I go to vote, I've done my research. I know who I'm voting for. I know about amendments that are going to be on the ballot. I've studied those things. Um, and you know, I think by and large, Baptist people are good-hearted, kind people, right? And so they get to the convention and they trust the platform. They
Hmm.
trust the platform. And they think, well, the platform wouldn't lie. The platform wouldn't manipulate. The platform wouldn't tell us this if it wasn't true. And so they just think it's unfair. You know, why are you guys standing at the microphone questioning the platform? Well, you know, a lot of times the reasons are presented very clearly at the microphone as to why we're questioning the platform.
Right.
And so it just, and I also think that uh, the North American Mission Board, particularly, and its president, Kevin Ezell, they're bringing their sin relief people in by the thousands, and they're paying for them to get to the convention. You got 2 or 3 thousand votes you've got to overcome right there because they're telling them how to vote. They're paying their way to get there. Um, I don't know that there's anything that can be done about that other than grassroots, regular, good old Southern Baptist folk got to understand what's going on, know the issues. I think pastors fail to talk to their people about the convention. It's just like, you know, we're going to do the Annie Armstrong Easter offering. We're going to do the Lottie Moon Christmas offering. We're going to give to the cooperative program because that's what we've always done. And we're just going to trust them. And, you know, you're giving people's hard earned tithe dollars to these mission organizations. They need to be held accountable. You know, you wouldn't let that go in your own local church. If you felt
Hmm.
like that money was being misspent in some way, you'd want some accountability from the pastor, from the staff. And so I don't think it's unreasonable to ask for that accountability. And that's one of the things we did. We had several motions that, in essence, said that we want our entities to provide IRS Form 990 information. And the 990, as you know, is required of any nonprofit. Now,
Hmm.
churches don't have to do it. The convention doesn't have to do it. Nobody was suggesting that that information needed to go to the IRS, but it needs to, that level of information about where our finances are needs to come back to the convention in some shape, form, or fashion.
Yes.
And,
Hmm.
uh,
Absolutely.
and the platform doesn't want that. They're hiding stuff. They don't want it to be known what they're doing with the money. And it's just like, this is the message that I got from the platform this year. Sit down, shut up, and send your money.
Hmm.
And I don't think any of us would accept that in the local church.
Shameful.
It
No.
is. It's absolutely shameful.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I know. I forget how to say his name. The new president of the executive committee, right? Iorg,
Right.
George.
Orge, yeah.
I didn't know a lot about him, to be totally honest, but I didn't ever hear anything bad about him as president of Gateway out in California. But some of the clips, I think it was John Harris did he was covering it on his show, and I just thought, what? Like just the browbeating is just, oh my goodness. I mean, they sound like leftists. They sound like, and whether you're a Democrat or a Republican in that case, where there's that browbeating, this insulting type of demeanor. Did you get that? I mean, I wasn't in the room, but
Yeah.
was that felt? Did you feel it? Did other people talk
Oh,
about it later after
absolutely.
that sermon, quote unquote?
Yeah, the platform folks talk down to those of us who have dared to question their authority,
Yeah,
to question their actions in any way. You know, James Merritt's done that a number of times. Every time he's gotten to the microphone, he's dressed
ugh,
everybody down. You know,
right.
and that's that. It's heartbreaking to see all of that. Um, but I think part of the issue um, really is money. Why are we from the platform concerned about the law amendment passing. Well, let's just talk about that for a minute. This is, again, it's my theory, but I'll maintain that I'm right with my theory here. The majority of churches in the SBC who do have female pastors on their staff, and I would say there are very few that that would be like Fern Creek that we ousted in Anaheim a couple years ago with a female senior pastor. Those are very few and far between. But it was Rick Warren who said there are something close to 2,000 Southern Baptist churches with female pastors. I didn't believe it, but the research has turned up about 1,800. But don't you think about now, the majority by far of churches that have female pastors on their staff, and regardless of whether they're just messing up the terminology, and wrongly using the term pastor, the majority of those churches are mega churches who potentially give money, a lot of money. And what we're concerned about, what Jeff Org and others on the platform, the reason that they came out so strongly against the law amendment is they are afraid of losing the money. And I would say this, I think that we would be better off to be smaller and have less money and yet be more faithful to the Word of God.
Yeah, my bride says that often, anytime she's gone to the convention.
And this is a biblical issue. It's not a tertiary issue. Yeah, it's not tertiary. It's clear biblical. We've stood on this for years. And so, what the law amendment would do, it would give the credentials committee the authority and the power. The credentials committee, of course, has been very weak over the last couple of years. And they kind of came crying to the convention, well, we don't know what to do. We don't know how to define the word pastor. Well, of course we know how to define the word pastor. But we put the law amendment in. Now you've got a clear statement, just like we do with a clear statement on homosexuality, a clear statement on race relations, that we're not going to put up with any kind of racist sort of activities. If your church is found to be that way, well, we're not going to be in friendly cooperation with you. And so this would have given the credentials committee, that basis, that foundation of which to deal with these churches. Some say, well, are you going to get rid of all of them? And well, absolutely. And if they don't agree with the Baptist faith and message, why wouldn't we? Right. And of course, one of the arguments that they come back with is, well, what about the autonomy of the local church? Well, they're not telling them what they can do. What about the autonomy of the Southern Baptist Convention? What about the autonomy of the state convention? What about the autonomy of the local Baptist association? All those groups have the same autonomy, and we choose to cooperate together. Now, there's some things that we can disagree on. I think you and I, Richard, would agree that there's a wide divergence of belief when it comes to eschatology, for example. But all of the guys that I know, regardless of whether they agree with my eschatology or not, believe the Bible is the inerrant, infallible Word of God. So they're coming to a little bit different conclusion. That's an area where I think that we can cooperate together and have a difference. But when the Bible is crystal clear about something, as it is in terms of who can be a pastor, we shouldn't have any disagreement. This is a funny instance that I had to kind of illustrate the problem. I've got a friend that I'm involved in a civic group, let's call it, and he's a liberal Democrat, but we're friends. We can talk about things, and so we ran into each other at a meeting, and he says, "What's this about the Southern Baptist Convention? Saying women pastors are okay." I said, well, it's not exactly what we said. All right. So, the way I explained it to him was I said, look, we have had 3 cases of churches brought before the convention who had female pastors who were, in essence, deemed not in friendly cooperation with our convention. I said, now what that means is not like they were excommunicated or kicked out. It simply means that we're not going to cooperate with you anymore. I said, because the Southern Baptist Convention is not a top-down organization. And we're really not a denomination. We're a convention of churches. And so I said, so So by an over 90% vote in 3 cases, we removed churches that had female pastors. I said, then the law amendment came along, and what that was designed to do, our statement of faith already said we only agree that men can be pastors, but the law amendment was going to put it in our Constitution. And I said it had to pass 2 years in a row. I said over 80% passed it in New Orleans last year, and a 61% majority passed it in Indianapolis. Unfortunately, it needed 2/3. And I said, so that amendment failed, but it didn't change our statement of faith, and it doesn't change the fact that as a convention, we don't believe women should be pastors. So now I've got to go through all this explanation with this guy. And he understood what I was explaining to him. Um,
Right.
so it's really a sad thing that we couldn't get the law amendment. And why did we not get it passed? Because the platform and many of our entity heads spoke out against it. And their
Right.
concern was the money. They were concerned, okay, are we going to go after all these churches and remove them? Now, let's fast forward a little bit and see what's happened here in Georgia. We have a church that has a female pastor on their staff, not senior pastor, and they actually literally had a celebration and said, we were going to get out of the Southern Baptist Convention. The law amendment passed. The law amendment didn't pass. So and they're just as egalitarian as they can be. Now, they're not even trying to hide behind, the nutty soft complementarian term. My philosophy on that is a soft complementarian is nothing but an egalitarian. It's a wolf in sheep's clothing, so to speak. And so we've got this church that's actually celebrating the fact that the convention did not pass the law amendment and bragging about the fact that they have a female pastor on their staff. And so that's what precipitated from this. That's what you get. And it's time for us to clean house on this. And if that means being smaller, then let's be smaller. The most important thing is being faithful to God's word.
Amen. I mean, and that's so. I mean, I've never had any sort of power like a lot of these people that you're talking about, and maybe it's just the whole English statesman for what absolutely power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely, and it's just like where aren't you a Christian? Like not you, but like if a million people leave, right? We go from 13 million down to 12 million, just for lack of a better word. You don't think God's going to provide? You don't think the Lord will embolden those who are His, who want to be proclaiming the truth, living the truth in this crazy, crooked, twisted, upside down culture? That you don't think He's going to bless the efforts of faithful people trying to stand on His word? Like, where's your trust in the triune God of the universe? It's just, we're going to lose money. Who cares?
Yeah.
Have you read history? I mean, it's just it's mind numbing the things that are that way. I don't know. Like I don't get it. I mean, it's very, very frustrating, and I do question. Man, you don't know the heart, but you can see the actions, you can see the fruit, and it's difficult.
Behavior reveals what people believe. And the behavior of some of our entity heads just blows me away. But they don't want to be held accountable, and that this became very evident with the motions about financial transparency. And one of the platform folks made the comment, well, you just want to know how much everybody, what their salaries are. And I thought, yeah, kind of. Yeah, kind of like to know that.
Yeah, and so what? So what if I do?
Yeah. I mean, that information has to be reported by every other nonprofit,
right?
We've all got the feeling that it's gotten out of control. Does the president of one of our seminaries deserve a good salary? Absolutely. And I'm all for we need to pay people more than they're worth. I had somebody ask me one time, said, well, Pastor Tom, is your church paying you what you're worth? And I said, oh no, not at all. I couldn't live on that. I'm grateful for the graciousness of God's people throughout my ministry that have been gracious to me and kind and taken good care of me financially. I appreciate that. But as a pastor, I've never allowed the budget to publish individual salaries. Now, any tithing member of the church who wanted to know what the salaries were would be told. We just didn't put it in writing. Here's the thing: we just want some accountability. We want somebody to know where the money's going. And the North American Mission Board is the worst of the worst in terms
Sure.
of no accountability for where the money's going. And the evangelism department has all but been eliminated at the North American Mission Board. And I was on the executive board of the Georgia Baptist Convention when Ezel took over, and NAM changed all their cooperating agreements with state conventions and local associations. And in essence, what they said to us in Georgia is that we're not planting churches in Georgia anymore. We're going to Seattle. We're going to Cleveland. We're going to Denver. And now we find out they've been buying up houses and property in all these places. And we're like, what in the world is going on? But we can't get any accountability. We don't really know what's happening. And
Wow.
it's tragic, really tragic.
So would you say then, back to your comment a while ago, Tom Rainer's son, it was saying we're more conservative than we were. So you say we're less conservative than
Oh,
we were 4
absolutely.
years
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah.
Okay.
At least from the standpoint of our entities and our platform personnel, our overall appearance on the evangelical landscape. I would say that the average Southern Baptist church that runs 75 to 100 on Sunday morning out in rural America somewhere is as conservative or more conservative than they were 40 years ago. And I think
Hmm.
that's true of the average Southern Baptist person, individual, but it's certainly not true of our seminaries. We had turned our seminaries around, and now they've just gone in a completely different direction. I mean, some of our seminaries are off the charts on this social justice stuff.
Right.
Southeastern, Southern, New Orleans, just off the charts. I mean, we've got professors that are CRT experts. And of course, we allowed a resolution to be passed in 2019 that says you can use critical theory as an analytical tool. Now,
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
I'm concerned as to why we need any analytical tool other than the Word of God.
Right. Yeah. 100%.
If you study the Word of God, everything that's false will show up against that as false.
Hmm. Yeah. It that's again makes me think, wait, are you Christian or not? Like, wait, what are we doing here? But I want to address that for a moment then, because it seems like, so I didn't go in 2019. I finished seminary in 19, and then of course COVID. Orlando was supposed to be in Florida in 2020, and then they just kept going with Nashville in 21. And so Nashville was the biggest of the last four, right? What, 15, 14,000 people. And, it seemed like, all right, we're going to conquer CRT. The conservatives are out to play. And like you said, Mike Stone had the most votes, although you need 51% to get across the finish line. And nobody had that with the four candidates they had on the first round. But I remember, rescind Resolution 9. There was a lot of talk. I went to a luncheon. It was one of the more, and that was when I became an abolitionist, and really seeing the pro-life infrastructure and how there was a couple resolutions that we voted against or changing. And I thought, I thought we were wanting to stop abortion. We're trying to make these nuances. And anyway, this isn't about me, but each year, so 2019 was Resolution 9, right? And I remember Tom Askell and others standing up and analytical tool, we're going to pass it, we'll package it. And then 2021, we've got sex abuse stuff starting. And then 22, of course, the guidepost report and this huge multi-million-dollar thing we just threw money out the window at. And then now it's female pastors, which started in 22 at Anaheim and overlapped with Rick Warren, and then he got kicked out in 23, and then the other
Right.
churches in 23, and this year in 24. But it seems like every year, my point is, every year there's something else. Kind of like we're a toddler you know, looking to the new thing, and I want to play with that toy, and then they bang it around and break it, and then they go off and have a snack, and then now they're taking a nap. And it's like, what are we doing? Why is there no? And none of these things seem to be resolved. I really don't know who believes what about Resolution 9
Yeah.
or CRT. I feel like most people know it's a scam. I think the world, unfortunately, has told us that more than the church. Not unfortunately for that, but the
Right.
church should have said that, right? The SBC, the PCA, conservative Christians should have been like, this is garbage, and then the world follows along. But it seems like the world is coming along with things, and then the church is like, oh, yeah, that we don't do that anymore. What's up with that? Why do we bounce from issue to issue each year?
Well, one of the things that you will hear from the platform is, when we start questioning things like the sex abuse task force and all the issues that went along with that, when we start questioning, hey, we need to do something about this female pastor problem, they'll say, well, if you guys were as concerned about evangelism as you are about CRT, we'd have won the world to Christ by now. Well, we are all concerned about evangelism, but that doesn't mean these other things are not important as well. And so, let's just focus on the main thing, and let's make the main thing winning people to Jesus. But we're not winning people to Jesus. Our baptism numbers are in the tank. We're baptizing at a rate lower than we were in the 1940s, with less than half the number of churches. So these doctrinal compromises, I think, have a lot to do with that. Belief predicates behavior. What you believe is going to determine how you behave. And if we allow doctrinal compromise in any area, that is going to weaken us in the area of evangelism missions. There's no way that it couldn't do that. And so I think that's a big part of the problem. We get these lectures, TED Talks, if you will. Oh, well, let's just be concerned about the main thing, and let's just all forget about our differences and press on, and let's just love Jesus and go tell people about Jesus. Well, that's all fine and good, but all this other stuff impacts us. The thing that the unity that's held, I think, Baptists together over the years is this fundamental belief in the authority, in the inspiration, and the inerrancy and infallibility of God's word. And we've got to stand on that foundation. Now, the folks on the platform would tell you they're inerrantists and they believe in the infallibility of the scripture. And yet you look at their actions and you see where they're going with CRT, with sex abuse, all this kind of thing. It makes you wonder what they really believe. But like you've said a couple of times, I'm beginning to wonder if you're really a Christian. Based on
how else are we supposed to observe that?
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, it's especially the tactics, the browbeating, the things that are obviously used in normal, quote unquote, political rallies and talking about, the opponents of whoever. It's not just Democrats that do it, though many Democrats do. Hillary, the deplorables in 2015 and 16, good example of that. But Republicans do it too. But it's like, I don't like. There's a mixed bag of believers in politics, but we're all believers here. We all love Jesus here, right? Thumbs up, cool, okay, not okay, pat on the back. Okay, now, right? Now let's do this thing. Now we're going to hope and believe and endure all things because love never fails. We're going to give the benefit of the doubt. We're going to be, hey, I sinned against you. Will you forgive me? We're going to do these things because that's what Christians do. Not to stay saved or get saved, but because we are saved, we're redeemed. This is what we do.
Right.
But it doesn't seem like, well, our money, our this, our donations, our the world's watching. I mean, we haven't said that since 21, but
the world is watching.
In my mouth.
We stand at the microphone and we expose the ERLC, for example, and I would say the ERLC's position on abortion, they're pro-abortion with exceptions. That's the ERLC's position. I mean, they're I can't remember if it was Nashville or Anaheim where they came out with their, we want to make abortion unthinkable. Abortion is unthinkable. We need to make it that. That's the way it is. It's unthinkable. Are you kidding me? But then we have the president, Brent Leatherwood of ERLC, standing up here. Well, we don't want to punish a woman. But then you can see the videos of women who are saying, I'm going to get pregnant just to murder the baby. And when you have those kind of statements going on, I think you can say, well, that person is culpable. And of course, they always pull out the example of the sex trafficked 13-year-old that gets pregnant and is forced to have an abortion. And they're saying that you abolitionists, you want to put that girl in jail. Of course not. And they just misrepresent. They burn the straw man and misrepresent the position. And so we've got a commission that is supposed to be representing Southern Baptist ideals at the nation's capital, and they're not. And so
Yes.
One of the things that I've said for several years now is the only thing they understand is stop giving them your money. And I can tell you the ERLC nor the North American Mission Board get any money from me or my church. I'll get a dime. And until we withhold the funds, that's the only thing that would get their attention, because that unfortunately seems to be the only thing that they're about.
Yeah, I mean, it sure seems like it. I mean, I don't know how else. Yeah, I mean, how else are you supposed to understand it? I mean, we're just idiots, right? I mean, I guess that's what they think because they treat us like that, right?
Yeah, somewhat like useful idiots. I mean, that's, as I said, it's kind of like many of our folks. I don't want to come off, sounding mean or rude, but I just feel like a lot of our folks go to the convention and they just don't think. They don't think through what they're being told. They don't listen well, and it's extremely frustrating because there's been quite a number of people that have made very clear what the problems are, but we simply cannot get the vote. Right. And I say every year this is going to be my last year, but I think that the Southern Baptist Convention is so important to the evangelical landscape and literally to the political landscape of our nation. We need the SBC to be strong, to be vibrant, and to be a voice for the unborn, to be a voice for the people, so to speak, in terms of religious freedom and freedom of speech and all of that. It's absolutely critical. And we've got this billions of dollars in terms of investments and property and funds. And I just hate to see us lose that to the liberals, if you will, because eventually they're the ones that are going to end up with it if we keep going in the direction that we're going. We need another conservative resurgence.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I was going to ask you, and I've not heard anybody, at least in my circles, say they're leaving. So you're saying the same thing. We're sticking it out. I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah, I'm not going anywhere yet, but I'm hearing from every year. I hear from pastors. In fact, this was part of the conversation I had with Sam Rayner. He's saying that the convention is more conservative, and I said, yeah, but Sam, it's the conservative churches that are leaving.
Mm-hmm.
It's guys that have just had enough. I'm not going to call any names, but I know of several pastors, love them dearly, good, godly men, and they are just absolutely fed up. And they pull their churches out. Good, strong churches, evangelistic churches, winning people to Jesus, had previously been faithfully giving to the cooperative program, to our mission offerings every year. It's the conservative churches that are pulling out. And it's heartbreaking to see it. But when you just feel like there's no accountability, nobody's listening, nobody cares. I mean, you could look at, NAM's interference with Will McRaney's situation in the Maryland-Delaware Convention.
Yes. Yeah.
There's just so many things that you can point to and say there's something bad wrong at the top. And then, of course, in the process of that, you have ERLC and NAM submitting affidavits to the courts, basically saying we're a top-down denomination and you work for us.
Unreal. That's unreal.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, besides, I guess besides electing presidents, I mean, what we have to send more people. I mean, again, I thought Nashville was going to be kind of watershed moment where we're going to be seeing upper teens, if not 20 or more thousand people. You know, maybe not Anaheim, but I figured New Orleans or certainly Indianapolis. And somebody might say, "Well, you weren't there, Richard." Well, I've got some personal things going on, and I'm not a pastor anymore, and we're having to move, blah blah blah. So that's my excuse. But a lot of people, they don't seem to care. And I mean, I don't know. I guess the local churches, like you said a moment ago or a while ago, it's like with the people who don't vote. Like, well, I'm not going to vote for Trump. He's just oh, you're going to vote for Biden? Well, I'm not going to vote for Biden either. Maybe I'll vote for RFK. Well, okay, maybe RFK is better than Biden, but he's still pro baby murder. He's still pro a lot of things. Or you're just not going to vote at all, but then you're going to complain for the next 4 years after that. So they, I don't know. I mean, address those who go to churches like that. I mean, anybody can go to the meeting, right? So long as you have a spot and your church.
Well, yeah, you're allowed
messengers.
Yeah, messengers based on the amount of money that you give to the convention.
Yeah.
And so every church could at least send their pastor and his wife to the convention.
Or a deacon or anybody, right? I mean, it doesn't have to be pastor.
Well, it doesn't have to be the pastor. It could be anybody. And most churches probably give enough money to have, up to 10. I think 10 is the maximum, or maybe it's 15 now. I don't remember. But, you
12
send,
sounds right, but it could be something like
something in that neighborhood. It used to be 10. It may be a few more than that now. But, you could take your messengers and go. But you got to be concerned enough about it to know what you're doing when you get there and be prepared and know how to vote. And that's part of the problem is that we just don't get prepared. It's like we don't really care that much. We just
that's what
go along to get along.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, it goes back to the politics, and in one sense, I mean, it's the Baptists, though the SBC started in 1850s, but Baptist congregational voting, right? That whole thing in a representative type of government. I mean, it's not strictly a Baptist thing. I mean, there were others involved at the American founding, but there were Baptists there, and there are a lot of principles that are the same. And it's just like today, everybody's just fat and happy. Lights are on, roads are paved. Yeah, sure, eggs are $4 or $5 a carton, or a dozen, whatever. And gas is $3.50 again, or $4.50, or $6 if you're in California. Blah blah blah. And yet people just endure it. I mean, I guess I don't know. We'll wrap up with this, and I want to talk just briefly about the military. I know that's kind of a segue, but we'll get there. It's kind of the liberalization of the military as well, since you're a military guy. I've been in it for a long time. But why are people, say 1984, 40 years ago, to 2024? I don't know where the meeting was in 84, but that's when the ship was starting to move, right? And people were going.
Right.
They were making peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, sleeping in vans. They'd take everybody. They'd sleep in a motel on the ground. Do this. They would just show up to the meeting. They vote for the president. Boom, and then they're back to work. Guys are taking time off. They're driving, several hundred miles, maybe even 1,000 miles. They're not flying. They're not in first class. They're not in 5-star hotels. They're not eating fancy meals. They're just going. This is what we're doing. Why aren't people doing that now, Tom?
Because we don't have the same commitment and conviction that we had. We have a convention full of people with preferences. And there's a difference in a preference and a conviction. A conviction is something that you're basically willing to lay down your life for. You're not going to back down on your convictions. We had convictions. My first convention, I was a seminary student, so my first convention was 1985, and it was in Dallas. There were 45,000 people at the convention in Dallas. And myself, I just graduated from seminary, and myself and 3 other students, we piled in an old car, and we drove from North Carolina to the convention in Dallas. And we
Texas, about in June.
Yeah, in June, hot as it can be. Okay. And so someone, I don't know who had actually got behind it, but they had organized and asked churches to provide housing. And so the four of us stayed with a family from a church there in the Dallas area, slept on the floor in their home, got up every morning, went to the convention, stayed all day, came back, slept for a few hours, got up, went back the next day, slept on the floor, came back the next day, and we were there. We took our coolers and we tried that. And of course, the next year in Atlanta, 46,000 in Atlanta. I was fortunate. I had family in Atlanta. That's where my parents are. And so, and I was in South Georgia at that time. So I came up, stayed with my folks, same kind of thing. Went to the convention there every day. And we tried taking the coolers and they wouldn't let us in. It was really funny in Atlanta. There were just thousands of coolers piled up outside the
Wow.
convention because they wouldn't let us carry them in for some reason. I forget what the deal was with that. But, there was a tremendous amount of conviction. And, we've got to fix this thing. We've got to get it done. We're missing the statesmen that we had, the W.A. Criswells, the Jerry Vines, the Adrian Rogers, those type men who gave us great leadership during those days, Paige Patterson and men like that who led that conservative resurgence, had a heart for the things of God, and saw the significance and the importance of turning the convention around, and they figured out how to do it. And how you do it is you elect a conservative president, and that conservative president makes conservative, genuine conservative. Not somebody just says they're a conservative, but somebody that actually has a behavior that demonstrates their conservative beliefs. And so we elected those men. We got the trustee boards turned around. We got conservative men in the presidencies of our seminaries, and what an amazing change that it was. We don't have that same level of conviction. When I was coming along as a young pastor, I had a great deal of respect for many of the older men that I was learning from. And, as I got, more into the older age group of pastors, I started hearing this, well, the young guys need a seat at the table. Well, when I was a young guy, there were no seats at the table for young guys. It was something that you earned through perseverance and experience. And I'm not saying that we ignore the young guys. They often have an awful lot of good input that they can make. But the point is that, back in those days, there were men, godly men with godly convictions that were willing to stand up and be counted. They were bold, and they stood behind their convictions, and that's what we're missing today. We're missing that level of boldness, and that's true in the political realm, and it's certainly true. The evangelical is almost a term anymore that I'm getting afraid to use. We've had to change our names. Used to be you could just be a Christian, and then you had to be a fundamentalist, and then you had to be a conservative, and now the term is evangelical, but evangelical keeps drifting to the left. And I want to throw an anchor out there and grab it. I don't want to lose the term, but there's an awful lot of evangelicals that are so far removed from me in terms of what they believe, in terms of their theology and their practical application, their methodology, that we're not really the same.
Yes. Yeah. It's true. I mean, historically, there's all sorts of different names. There's plenty others that we could probably resurrect and use as well. But yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, do you think is it because we have more stuff? Is it social media? Is it just people are more comfortable? I mean, obviously, you're still around 40 years later, right? There's many that are. And I know men who are bold and convictional, but it doesn't seem like there's as many.
Yeah, that's it. It's not that there are not any bold, convictional men. Obviously, there are.
Right.
We look at some of these guys that we have had the opportunity to elect as president of the convention that didn't get elected. They're bold, conservative, godly men, and there are a lot of them. I don't want to disparage that at all, but it's a numbers thing. There's just so many. I don't know. I hate to say this, but I think there are just too many pulpits that are filled by sissies and not real preachers.
Mm,
And they're afraid to address the issues, afraid of what somebody's
yeah.
going to say or think. And so we need men that are bold for the Lord and bold for our convention and recognize the danger that we are in.
Yeah. No, I mean hmm. That's I mean that's it. I mean, I agree. I mean, that's it's I guess the question of how do you how do you execute that? How do you get those men who are bold? And there are many, and you if you watch older clips, videos, whatever, you see a lot of the same guys at the microphones, which is good, great, praise God. But it's like getting those other people to understand. And I talked with this with Michael Clarion, the interview I had with him. That was he went for the first time in several years, and he talked to some people afterward and was like, I feel like if we just talked about some of these issues, like, hey, this is why the law amendment's really useful. Like, oh, okay. And like he's like, I feel like that most people would agree, but they didn't vote for it. And so it's like they kind of get manipulated, like you're saying, and they don't use their brain, or they get emotional. And you know, there were a few times in the last couple of years, meetings that I've gone to, similar, where you're kind of like, man, this is just almost exciting. There's a little bit of electric buzz. There's, hey, we've got missions and this and sending people, and you know, everybody's healthy and great. And so, we want to be people pleasers to a degree. I think most people are. I think most people want to get along. Most people want to be friends, at least in respect, especially as conservatives. We're not as shrewd um, as serpents, right? We're not as cunning as a leftist might be, whether they're a political or religious leftist.
Yeah, Richard, I've always said that I don't ever want to be personally offensive to anyone, but I've also said, but if the gospel offends you, you need to be offended.
Hmm.
If the truth
Yeah.
offends you, you need to be offended. Here's what I think that we have done in the convention. We have sacrificed truth on an altar of unity,
Mm.
and we should never do that. We can never sacrifice our truth. And if I have sacrificed my truth to be unified, then I'm not going to be unified. The truth of the matter is, biblically, truth is the thing that unifies us. We are
Yeah.
unified on the truth. And so it really is a concerning thing that we don't seem to have the courage of our convictions anymore, which when that becomes the case, then you really don't have convictions. You simply have preferences. Well, I'd prefer that women not pastor churches. Well,
Yeah.
the conviction says that you're going to vote for the law amendment and see to it that that doesn't happen. Oh, well, what if you know as well as I do in the local church sometimes you'll have a situation come up. Maybe it's a need for church discipline. And somebody will say, well, yeah, but if we do that, they'll leave the church. And, there's a time which we need to say, well, don't let the door bump you in the backside on the way out.
Yeah.
There's a time when we need to get smaller. And that time has come for the Southern Baptist Convention. When we start talking about, well, we got to have a big tent, that's the problem in politics. What's
Yeah.
happened is the camel's nose has gotten under the tent.
Hmm.
And so, you mentioned earlier, and this may be a good segue to get into talking about where we are in the military. Um, I think our military is much softer than it was. I retired almost 20 years ago. I retired in 2005 after 28 years, Navy and Air Force. My last job, I was the command chaplain to special operations in Afghanistan.
Mm.
And when I was over there, somebody asked me the question, before I went over. So, or do you have any fear? Are you afraid? And I said, you know what? I'm going over there with the best war fighters that have ever existed in the history of mankind. No, I'm not afraid. Not as much as I would be if I were driving on Interstate 285 around Atlanta. That could be fearful. But You know, I was over there with some of the greatest warriors that I've ever been around in my life. Good men, manly men, strong men. And you know, in our what's happening in our convention, similar to what's happening in our military, we feminized it. We have
Hmm.
emasculated men and women. Um, and you know, there's a lot of courageous and good women that have served in our military and done good jobs. I don't mean to knock that at all. But I will tell you, war fighting is a man's job,
Hmm.
and standing up to the issues that we have within our convention, we need good, godly men. You know, we talk about, you know, a plurality of godly leadership in our churches. We need to raise up godly men that will stand against things. You know, we just went through a real uh, difficult circumstance in the church where I was serving as interim pastor, and have actually agreed to stay on now sort of as an indefinite pastor to get us through this rough patch. But you know, I had initially, because of the problems, had decided it was time to resign, and some of the men came to me and said, you know, we really need you to stay. And I said, look, guys, I'm not a hitman, and I can't take the guy out. But if I said, if I could get 10 of you guys or more to stand up to this individual and to do the right thing, I'll issue you boys water pistols. We'll storm hell, jack it up, and put a stump under it. And I was really surprised. They said, "Well, Pastor, tell us what to do." I told them what to do, and they did it, and they were able to overcome the enemy because they were bold, they were strong, they were godly, and they followed biblical instructions, and they did church discipline as it's supposed to be done. And the problem was overcome in the life of the church. Now there's a process where we've got to build back. We had to get smaller before we could get bigger. And I think that's a principle that we need to apply in the convention. But
Hmm.
it's going to take bold, godly, strong men to turn this thing around.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, that's a great place to stop. I know we talked about other things, military stuff more specifically, and we could probably get into that. Maybe we can do another show with that. I'd love to talk more about rural
Yeah,
church as well, but I think this is enough. I hope this was helpful for the audience as well. I think it was. It's helpful for me. Again, because it's, you know, it's. I mean, we have to be sober, right? We can't just be, oh, everybody's good, everybody's all great, you know, kind of this high, kind of artificial joy. But at the same time, we also can't be doom and gloom, you know, always negative, always this, always discernment. There's a lot of those ministries out there, and you know, there's pros and cons to those as well. But
sure.
we have to be sober, right? There are problems in the SBC. There's problems in the military. There's problems in politics. You know, and I think a lot of it. I think the big principle is just like you said earlier. With we're so big. I mean, our country's massive. You know, we're the world's police. At least that's what people think we are. You know, with
Right.
the military, and our budget's enormous. You know, politically, our budget's enormous, and our deficit is out of control. And then even the SBC, you know, it's massive, and we've got to reach around the world, IMB, and of course the NAM locally or in the country, domestically, and it's too big. You know, it's just too big. I think in all of those accounts, and let's get back to having something that's manageable. And I think, if anything, I would say that as an encouragement, if people do leave, or we have, or even with illegal immigration, you know, these invaders, as people will call it, which probably is the case, better than anything else these days. You know, that yes, they need to be deported. People think, well, you want to deport everybody? Uh huh.
Yes, I
Because
do.
they're
Yeah,
here
sure.
illegally. You know,
Yeah,
like we need to get smaller. We don't have the programs. Like, you want
right.
to come through the front door, fine, but don't break into my back door and sit on my couch and expect me to just be like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
pat you on the back and give you a snack. Like,
Well, you mentioned, Richard, you know, the size of the SBC, and I have to say that any organization that's big, changes are certainly not going to come overnight. There does have to be some degree of patience. And, you know, when you start talking, for example, we've talked a lot about financial transparency. You're not going to be able to control it down to the dime. but
Yeah.
we just need more accountability and more transparency. And that's what many of us are working for and what we desperately want. And I think that the average Southern Baptist would want that as well. So we just got to get more educated. And I don't think it's time to give up. I want to encourage pastors out there to uh, get informed about what's going on in the convention, and do everything you can to show up in Dallas next year and be ready to vote. And let's go to the microphone. Let's let our feelings and concerns be known. We have a responsibility to do that. We have every right to do that. And that's the only hope for our convention to turn around, is that the good, godly, Bible believing Baptist people and their pastors have got to come to the convention to vote.
Yeah. Amen. There's
Yeah.
plenty of time now, right? We got
Yeah.
10 months easily, 11 months.
Yes,
So,
sir.
all right. Well, Dr. Tom Rush, thank you for the time. I really appreciate it. Where
Yeah,
can
you're
people
very
find
welcome,
you, by the
Richard.
way?
I'm sorry.
Where can people find you? Website?
Oh, okay. Well,
Things
a
like
couple
that.
places. I'm just going to say, if anybody wanted to engage me in further conversation about this or ask a question, they could get me at drthomasrush@gmail.com. drthomasrush@gmail.com. And my website is Tread Ministries, TREAD, treadministries.org. And they can reach me through that. Yes, sir.
All right. I'll put those links in the description as well. So
Yeah, that'd be great.
it's a pleasure. Thank you so much. Appreciate the time.
Yep. Thanks, Richard. God bless.